All right, folks, you're in for a treat because I've got the one and only legendary guitar swinger of Canada and abroad, Colin James, on the line with me. How are you doing, man?
I'm good, man.
Well, that's good, man. I should congratulate you because you've been inducted, I guess, into the Western Canadian Music Hall of Fame, man. Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, it's in Regina. I guess coming up in a couple weeks or something. So that'll be kind of cool to be in my birthplace, and I think we're going to play a little bit as well. So it'll be fun.
Yeah. Well, I mean, now that's an interesting thing. I mean, I know I sort of name dropped the prairies there, but I know you were born and raised in Regina, as you mentioned, and I think if my information is correct, you were sort of raised into a family that appreciated music, and you were exposed to a wide variety of genres early on.
Yeah. My mom and dad, neither of them played music, but both were big fans. And plus I had older brothers and sisters too, so that really, and an uncle who was into music. So all around, from my mom and dad, they were real folkies. They were the type that loved Dylan before he went electric in the early days. They were kind of pissed off like everyone else was, and later on they loved Bob Dylan like we all did after people got used to Blonde on Blonde and all that. But so they'd take me to the folk festival, Winnipeg Folk Festival, when I was probably starting when I was like 10, 11 years old. And including our own local folk festival, and I would see people like Bill Monroe and Johnny Shines and Roosevelt Sykes from Kansas City and Odetta, and amazing people. John Hammond Jr. And so I got raised up in a lot of music, and then my older brother Robbie, he loved Hendrix and Cream and Blind Faith, and so I got a big hit of that, Grateful Dead, and got a hit of that too.
Was it a guy like Hendrix that sort of inspired you to pick up the guitar?
It wasn't just Hendrix. He was one of the people. I think the early Fleetwood Mac records were huge for me. The Peter Green records.
Yeah.
Early John Mayall records. I used to love John Mayall Jazz Blues Fusion years ago. Dickie Betts from the Allman Brothers. Like so many guitar players, Jessica. And a lot of the stuff off Brothers and Sisters, I was really into that when I was young. Steve Miller, I was a massive Steve Miller fan. A few years ago, I got a chance to play with him, and I've been really lucky that way over the years. I've had a chance to play with Albert Collins and Carlos Santana, but that was a really just to get up with Steve Miller was pretty neat, and he was a really nice guy about it.
No kidding. Well, you were 16 when you shared the stage with the likes of John Lee Hooker and then also George Thorogood. I think those gigs happened in Regina. Your band opened for them. I mean, that's pretty incredible for a 16-year-old impressionable fella as well, I would imagine.
I had a little band called the Hoodoo Man, and we were like a harmonica player, myself, drums and bass. We started out just playing like duo acoustic blues, like Robert Johnson stuff, and then we put a little band together. So we would do Regina, Saskatoon, Winnipeg. That was our triangle, and we were really lucky to get the Thorogood dates because we did Regina and Winnipeg on those ones, and then the John Lee Hooker one was great. First of all, I got to talk to John Lee Hooker, and that was pretty exciting for me.
No kidding, yeah. Well, what sage advice, I was just going to say, what sage advice did guys like John Lee Hooker give for the young and up-and-comers?
He didn't give me advice so much as just said nice things,
Uh-huh.
He just said nice things, and it was amazing to see him, As you go, like years ago, I almost didn't go see Muddy Waters. Muddy Waters played in Regina in 1981. And I remember thinking, I'm kind of tired. I might not go, and I would have regretted that for the rest of my life. So that was cool.
No
but
kidding.
those dates with Thorogood and John Lee Hooker were, we got a good write-up in the newspaper, and I think they had, something to do with when Stevie Ray Vaughn came a couple of years later. That probably has something to do with me getting the the gig with the local promoter,
Yeah. Well, now I've read almost, you be described as like Stevie's protege. I mean, how close was that relationship?
Well, it was pretty cool because it lasted over a few years because I met him. It's really hard for me to remember the order of events, but I think it was '84 the first time I met Stevie, and I opened up for him in Saskatoon and Regina. And at the time, I'd already moved to Vancouver.
Yeah.
And I was in a band, and I opened up a couple shows then, and we had a great time. And at the time, he asked me if I wanted to go on the road and to the States and open up some shows down there. And I couldn't do it because I was in a band out of Vancouver. And the guy who ran the band told me if I didn't get back home, I'd lose my gig.
Oh, no.
So I had to knock it on the head. So I came back to Vancouver to keep my gig, and I got a job with Billy Cowsill.
Yeah.
Billy was of the Cowsills fame, sang the original Hair. Great guy. He's not with us anymore. Mm-hmm. And I was playing with Billy, and then I got a call about a couple years later saying Stevie Ray Vaughn was in Edmonton and Calgary. Could I open up for the shows? So that was amazing. So I guess Stevie had kind of put the word out. If I was still around, could I do it? And so I busted over there and got a band together at the last second and opened up for them there. And that's after that, he bought me a couple plane tickets to the States, and the whole band was pretty kind to me at the time. And I went on the road for maybe 2.5 weeks or something. I think we went from Cleveland and Ann Arbor, a whole bunch of cities, and by Denver, I took off back to Vancouver. But had a lot of amazing experiences, and I got to play with Stevie. Every second night or so, he'd get me on stage for the encores, and
wow.
And then later on, as I established myself a little bit more, he got me up in Vancouver and Tampa and some different cities like that later on too.
Yeah. It sounds like the relationship was pretty close. So, I mean, what did you glean from just being around a guy like that?
We became fast friends. He was a super nice guy. It's always strange when someone's not around anymore because people forget kind of what the person was like.
Yeah.
But he was just really, really kind, and he really couldn't. I guess he was kind of surprised that somebody from Saskatchewan, from the middle of Canada, would know some of the names of the people that he listened to. Mm-hmm. And we just became fast friends because we were big fans of Ray Agee, who did the original Tin Pan Alley. Mm-hmm. And that was kind of the icebreaker for me and for he and I. And then after that, we would just, he was just really, really, would go out of his way to help out. And that was, it's funny. I ran into Chris Layton just the other day. We played with Kenny Wayne Shepherd out in Quebec. Uh-huh. And I hadn't seen Chris in a while. It was really nice to kind of sit and talk about some of the old times.
Yeah. Well, where were you then in 90 when you found out about Stevie and his passing?
I was in Portland, and I had just done a cross America tour with a woman from Atlanta, and I can't remember her name now, but we had gone all through the States, and we ended up in Portland, and that's when I, of course, heard the news. And, what was particularly, it was unbelievable, and I went back to Vancouver. I was supposed to be playing England with Stevie the following week. Oh, wow. We were booked into it might have been Albert's Hall. It was a big place for me, and I was really excited because I hadn't really done anything in England, and and we ended up going to Stevie's funeral, and then of course I ended up going to Europe anyway and opened up for Los Lobos at the Town and Country in London. But there you go. Too bad. Yeah.
Well, one of music's truly great losses, and that's probably even an understatement. And it's awesome that you got to even spend, a little bit of time with him while he was here. Yeah.
He loved to sit in the back of the bus and listen to like Muddy Waters records or any record. And he was super studious on who played what on every single Howlin' Wolf track. And then, so he loved doing that. He just knew a lot about it. It was pretty impressive.
Yeah, well, you hear him play Hendrix too, and it's almost like, he plays so clean. It's like he's playing Hendrix better than Hendrix. Maybe that's a sacrilegious comment.
Well, it is. Things like that are always tough, but Albert King. I mean, look at the way he interpreted Albert King. I mean, that's where I first heard him, because no one played Albert King like that, and that was the first time I heard someone play like Albert King for reals. It was like shocking.
Well, now, I mean, fast forwarding up to the now, you are getting ready to release Blue Highways on October 14th. And I know, a lot of what's being said about this is it's your first true, complete, and perhaps comprehensive blues album, right? I mean, it's all blues all the time with this one. Yeah.
Well, more so than, I mean, it's always hard to say, because, at the end of the day, the little big band records were blues records. But because there was a big swing revival going on, it became a little convoluted. But if you listen to, a lot of the songs, pretty much they're just, apart from having a large section, a horn section. But other than that, National Steel, which I did with Colin Linden in the mid '90s or late '90s. That was blues, but we were coming at more of an acoustic angle on that record. Now, although we played electric instruments, it was a little more traditional. This one is traditional, but traditional Chicago, more, in the Chicago blues vein. And I really wanted to make a record. When we set out to make this record, the idea initially was we just crossed the country. Everyone was having a good time. It was the end of the tour, and we thought, hey, we've been playing together for weeks on end. Let's go in and for 2 days at Bryan Adams' studio and see. Let's just play some blues.
Yeah.
That was the idea, and so we went and did beds for 2 days, and we just didn't belabor it too much. Tried to get as much live stuff off the floor as we could, and stuff that worked great, stuff that didn't, we just didn't finish. We just moved on.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the songs that I picked were songs that I've been playing since some of them as long as since I was 16, if you can imagine.
Wow.
And, you get these little favorites, and my little big band records were no different. A lot of the songs on those records were things that I had been carrying around since I first heard them when I was 16, 17 years old,
Yeah.
So that was cool, and it was really nice to get, a bit of Freddie King. We do a bit of Muddy Waters, and I think the thing was, at some point there was talk about trying to put more original stuff on it as well. And that's what happens sometimes when you start mixing originals and blues. It can work, but sometimes it makes the more modern stuff, makes the blues. I wanted to make a record where it was just blues.
Yeah.
And, as soon as you write your own stuff, as much as it might be bluesy, it's going to be a little more modern. And I really wanted to keep this focused, and that was the idea.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I think now the other thing that I think, is a bit of a telling quote too, maybe, is that you weren't necessarily thinking about contemporary radio with this one either.
No, because as soon as you get into that, it's like, I mean, first of all, I hate to say it, but in Canada, there's not a lot of room for contemporary rock blues on the radio format anymore, unless you're talking about, a specialty satellite station or something to that degree, that thing. So it was nice not to think about that. It really kind of wasn't the point of the record in the first place. And, I think I'm going down the Freddie King song's got a bit of legs because it kind of rocks. And I guess we'll see how that does,
Maybe throughout your career, you have thought about the, radio, quote unquote, off and on, but it hasn't necessarily driven you. You're more looking at an album as being, something to characterize your creative output at that period of time. And, you felt like making a blues record this time around because that's where your headspace was at. I mean, I think that's kind of what I'm hearing from you here.
So, yeah, it was just, it was, as you know, I mean, a lot of the more traditional places that would play this kind of the FM rock, they don't really, they play old classic stuff now. They don't play new stuff. So,
yeah,
like I told you, like we talked about, there's no real format for it on rock radio anymore. So
what's the point driving a record based on a single when there's no place to play the single? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, well, it's almost like radio by focus group nowadays, right? I mean, like if they know that people are gonna stay on for this, this particular brand of classic rock, or maybe the latest, pseudo generic pop hits, then at least people stay on for the adverts, and it's sort of just
they've tightened up so much that they're not even allowed to play a new track. Even if you just come into the studio for a conversation now.
Yeah.
They usually won't play a new track. They'll play I'll Leave, and they'll play Voodoo Thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's probably, so you just can't think that way anymore.
Well, listen, man, it's been great talking with you about your new record, Blue Highway, which is Blue Highways. Got to pluralize that. Blue Highways, October 14th. And also the Western Canadian Music Hall of Fame induction right in your hometown in Casino Regina, October 13th. Definitely a busy couple of weeks ahead in the world of Colin James, man.
Okay, dude. Well, thank you.
Yeah, have a good one. Bye-bye.
All the best. Bye-bye.